Do you ever wonder what the difference is between reading skills and reading strategies? You're not alone. So often, these terms are used interchangeably, but they're actually two different things that use different thinking skills, different parts of the brain, and have different purposes in your students' reading. Today, I have the skinny on exactly what are the reading skills and strategies and the difference between these two groups. I'm Lisa Burns, a teacher success coach, veteran elementary teacher, and mom of 5, and this is the Teach Joyfully podcast. Thanks for joining me today. Are you missing out? Team H.O.P.E Insiders get extra encouragement, tips and tricks, surprise freebies, and more. Become a H.O.P.E Insider today and get access to all kinds of freebies at www.hopeineducation.com/vault. All right, my friends, reading skills versus reading strategies. Do you know the difference? Let's begin by explaining what a skill and a strategy actually are. A strategy is something we use consciously. We think about what we're going to do or we're doing, what we're trying to figure out, and why. Now, skills are the things that we have to think about until they become pathways in the brain. They're habits, which means we do them on autopilot after we've really learned and practiced them. Think about a baseball player or a golfer. They know the stance, how to swing, they have a good eye. Many of these things they do are automatic. As long as they keep doing what works, they play well. Get in your own head about it and start second-guessing yourself, and well, you're the Colorado Rockies in the 2007 World Series, but that's another story. Let's just say it wasn't pretty. So let's start with reading skills. Not because they have to come first, they don't. If you read aloud to your students or your kids, then you can actually teach reading strategies long before your students or kids know how to read. Jumping back to reading skills though, reading skills are things you teach your students to do in order to be able to decode a text and actually read it, and some basic understanding, some comprehension. Reading skills aren't new. In 1997, the National Reading Panel came up with 5 skills, or more like pillars, that are necessary for students to be able to read successfully. And for the most part, they still hold strong today. So let's talk about those pillars. So the 5 pillars or groups of skills are phonemic awareness, which is orally hearing, identifying, and manipulating sounds in words. Phonics, which is putting sounds and letters together or groups of letters together and then pulling them apart and manipulating them to both decode words and to write words. Essentially, you're matching the spoken sound to the letters that represent them. Fluency, which has kind of gotten a bad rap. For a long time, it was the thing to do, and now it's kind of gotten a bad rap, but it's still important. Fluency is proper speed, cadence, and inflection. It isn't speed reading, which is really what a lot of kids kind of interpret it as when you talk about fluency. They think about reading fast. It's helpful if you tell kids to read like conversation, read like you're talking. Then their inflections and speed tend to be a little more appropriate for what they're reading. And we don't read at the same speed all the time. So fluency is more complex and complicated than we actually think of it as. But it comes over time with practice, hearing books read to them, and lots of these other skills. Okay, I'll get off of that soapbox. So let's talk about vocabulary. Now, vocabulary is important, mostly because one, we want to be able to read the words that are in the book. We also want to understand them, but it activates background knowledge. Students have quite a large vocabularies, and so they may be understanding words, but they can't read those words. So vocabulary is understanding new words and using their background knowledge to activate vocabulary and apply it. And the last pillar or group of skills is comprehension. At this level, in this 5-pillar level here, I look at it as this is that basic understanding. So it's checking for understanding at the story, sentence, and word levels. It's not that deeper comprehension. That's actually where strategies come in. So you can have students check for comprehension at this level. They're checking for understanding in many ways. And there's one way they can do a quick check after reading, and that is 3-2-1. So they 3 things that they learned, 2 interesting things about it, and 1 question or confusion. Or you can shorten that to 2-1, which is 2 things they learned or interesting things, and 1 question or confusion. So it's quick and easy, and it's a great way for a quick check on comprehension. All right, now reading strategies are what we use to comprehend the text at a deeper level. So this is really textual analysis and using evidence to prove our answers. So reading strategies can include, and yes, there's a much larger list than this, but this is pretty much what we'll deal with in the elementary level. Not all of them in the primary grades, but more and more as we get into the upper grades. And I do believe that we need to teach most of these at all grade levels, even in kindergarten to first grade. I know sometimes we pare things down a little bit for kindergartners and first graders thinking they can't do these things, but not only can they should, and they like doing them. And we'll get into some of that in future episodes, but just wanted to put that plug in there. Okay, so the reading strategies are making predictions, which is using context clues to predict what will happen next, asking questions, asking yourself questions before, during, and after you read, summarizing, a short retelling with only the most important parts, visualizing, creating pictures in your head of the characters, setting, and events from the description and clues in the text, making connections, connecting things you know about yourself, your world, and or other books that is similar to what you just read, using inferences, using clues in the text to discover what is implied but not explicitly written or stated, evaluating, in nonfiction, determining the information that matters most, what is most important. That's what evaluating is. Monitoring comprehension. This is essentially checking for understanding as we read. This can be done at the paragraph, page, and chapter levels in addition to constantly as we read. Author's purpose. Why did the author write the text? Main idea. What the text is mostly about. Comparing and contrasting. Analyzing 2 things by finding similarities and differences. So you can analyze 2 different characters in the books, things like that. Point of view. Who is telling the story? Whose view are the events being presented from? It matters in a book. And yes, there's more than just these, but for the most part, this is what we teach in elementary school. Now, sometimes teachers can get confused between strategies, skills, and the elements of a text, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. There are elements to fiction and elements to nonfiction, and sometimes we get confused. And I see teachers putting out anchor charts and things that actually include some of the elements of fiction or elements of nonfiction, which are not skills and strategies. So the elements of fiction and nonfiction absolutely help with comprehension. It's just a different group, and we teach it differently. And we'll talk more about them in another episode. So now that you know the difference between strategies and skills and what their purpose is, it's easier to figure out what you need to teach next and how to teach it. If we don't understand the difference between the two, it's hard to know where to begin to actually teach them. And it's easy to confuse our students too. So remember, those skills are things that we want to become automatic. They are things that we help students practice to be able to become better readers and work on the actual physical act of reading. We must start with phonemic awareness. Once the kids have it down, we can move into phonics and reading and putting those pieces together. We'll add in the fluency and the vocabulary as needed along the way. And we're always teaching students to have some quick checks for comprehension as they read. It can be very simple at the early stages simply because those books are very simple when students start. So we're not going to have deep conversations about those books, but we do want to make sure the students actually know what they read and that they're paying attention to the fact that knowing what you read was actually important as well. I do have a cheat sheet for you with the different skills and strategies and exactly what they are and their purpose. If you want to grab that, don't forget to go to the show notes. It'll be linked there at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. So that's it for this episode of the Teach Joyfully podcast. My sincere thanks to you, my listeners, for tuning in, and for those of you who have taken the time to send me an email, post a review, or DM me on Instagram with your feedback and topic requests. You can find the show notes and all the resources mentioned in the episode on my website at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. And remember, a happy teacher is a good teacher. Until next time, teach joyfully and take care of you.